communication. So people should, first of all, people should know what is at stake, what is the virus like, what is it causing, what are the symptoms, and how should they react in the first place. I think that is the very first thing, and then people should, once, if ever they show symptoms, they should report to the authorities so that the authorities can do all the best so that they can track and trace where, and in order to take the necessary measures to avoid further spreading of the virus. Otherwise, I think in general terms, I think it is necessary to take a scientific approach to this in terms of what the vaccination goes and also what the medicines goes in general terms. I think it is necessary to see that, first of all, that we will give access to vaccines as far as possible and give them maybe with priorities and maybe so with different age groups and so on, like in many countries that has been done. So I think that would be a first thing. But I think it's also a matter of openness and to be aware that this is a common problem that is not, the virus doesn't know any boundaries, no frontiers. It just goes, it spreads wherever it can. So it is a collective responsibility for all of us to address that and to help to be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting your answers based on the principles of communication and collective responsibility, as well as vaccine strategy. As for vaccine strategy, we also have a question specifically on that. Do you consider reopening the borders for vaccinated tourists? And what will be the conditions, such as less days for quarantine, vaccination, digital passport, a deposit in case healthcare is needed during the stay?
Thank you. Yes, these are indeed very important questions, especially for countries that highly depend in economic terms on tourism. So, and we have to strike the right balance between, on one side, guarantee the public health to everyone, and on the other side, the development of the economy, especially, as I said, in countries where tourism plays an important part. In that regard, of course, as I said before, vaccine strategies are extremely important, and hopefully vaccines can be distributed not according to political or ideological criteria, but should be made accessible as far and as fast as possible. Now, there is of course a question about the vaccine, the certificates, let's say. I think the vaccine certificates are a very interesting avenue to explore. It is something that could easily help us, first of all, to maybe give to some people a little bit more freedom if they are vaccinated and duly documented, of course. It is, of course, a question also how far such certificates are valid and traceable themselves in the sense that they are valid and not fake, because of course we know that it's always, whenever there is something like that, there is always also people who try to make fake documents in order to get benefits. So we have, of course, that is a big issue that has to be addressed. Now, the other aspect also, I think it is to have vaccine certificates that are accepted globally or at least regionally, so that they are, if we're talking, for instance, in the context of ASEAN, that there would be a coordination between ASEAN members to fix or to set up a system that is reliable and that is mutually recognizable. Like, for instance, between also Singapore and Malaysia, where they try to introduce such a passport, that would be good. Then, of course, it is, after all, it is the sovereign right of each and every country to decide what would be the quarantine measures. In Thailand, there is, of course, some ideas of giving access to, I don't know, resorts where you can maybe stay a little bit more relaxed and still enjoy kind of a holiday if you come in as a tourist. In other places, these measures are more strict. These are, of course, measures that are decided by each and every government, and that is necessary also. But again, I think it is also necessary to look for international cooperation so that there is also some kind of equity in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. How many questions do I have to ask for? Hello?
Mike.
Each of you has about 15 minutes.
Okay, okay.
And before we proceed, just a few observations. We did this also last week when we did the dry run with the others. And obviously, it's always easier when you see others on stage and help them improving than, you know, if you do it yourself. So Pam, you look very nicely in the camera. So that's great. Continue like that. So that's good. Just we have to figure out this virtual background for you. If I look at the two others, I think Charalampos sits very well. Pratibha, you could maybe move a little bit to your left. And I don't know if you have, for your side, the left. No, from your side, the left. The reason why I'm saying that is you have the logo, and maybe you come a bit closer because you are slightly smaller. It's a bit more difficult to see you. Yeah, that's nice. Just ensure that your face is between the compass and the logo, okay? Pratibha, when you, and also, I mean, I think, Charalampos, for you, it's clear you definitely do not wear a Tommy Hilfiger t-shirt on that day. That goes without saying. But also be careful with the colors you choose, that it's not too much your skin color, and definitely not white. Blue is okay, red is okay, black is okay. And yeah, that's just, and the other thing I wanted to tell you, to Pam, we try to have this, we try to simulate in a way a conversation. So if we highlight too much and we want to ask questions and questions, it's a little bit more, it gives us almost a feeling of a press conference. So try to avoid too much the term question, because then it becomes obvious that we have prepared everything in advance. Need to pretend that it is semi-spontaneous. Okay, each of you has about 15 minutes time, but we are trying to lighten up a little bit this conversation by a few elements, graphic elements. For now, we let you practice questions, but maybe you hand over now to Charalampos and we do a little bit more ping pong. Yeah. But at the actual meeting, we want to identify, you might recall the mind map which we did on SDG 3. The word cloud, yeah. Sorry, the word cloud, yeah. So we want to, for example, show that word cloud for you. And maybe Charalampos can highlight a few of these elements which were in the word cloud to make it a bit more visually appealing. So that's something which we are still working on, and we give you an update soon on that as well. Yeah. Right. Go ahead, ask each of you probably now 3 or 4 questions, and also try to find follow-up questions a little bit, poke him a little bit. And practice the hand over the transition. Thanks.
Okay, next up, I would like to invite my colleague, Charalampos, to have a few dialogues with Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, Pam, putting me on floor. Hello, Mr. Ambassador, His Excellency Parliamentary. I have a question about the strategy of your country. I'm very curious to know what Thailand have been done in order to improve the good health and well-being, especially during pandemic.
Thank you. Sorry, could you, the last half sentence, I could not understand well, sorry.
I'm very curious to know what Thailand have been done in order to improve the good health and well-being, especially during pandemic.
Thank you very much for this question. As I said before, you know, this is of course a little bit difficult for me as Leo to respond to that. But I think it is a very good question, and I'm also sure that the Deputy Prime Minister will be able to respond. So let me respond in more general terms regarding that. of course, a little bit the same things what I said already before, you know, that we need to take a scientific approach to this whole thing. We know that at one stage or another, the virus will disappear, but it will only disappear if we get what we call a herd immunity. And the herd immunity can become either through natural, so that so many people have been infected and that the virus doesn't find any new hosts anymore, or that we go through a vaccination. So that's why it is difficult for me to speak on Thailand on behalf, because I think that in Thailand, vaccinations have not been widely spread yet. So but I don't want, you know, to. But so again, what I think is what is necessary on the other side is that we maintain, first of all, very clear policies, health policies, public health policies, in the sense that keep social distancing, keep washing your hands, wear masks, and all of that, so that we inhibit the virus to spread. I think that is the main measures that everybody can take that will be able to help us avoid the spreading of the virus. Thank you.
Mr. Paramatriani, it's very important hearing from you the necessity for vaccination process, because as you mentioned, it's very important for the world to establish a herd immunity, and we can manage to do that only through the vaccinations process. I have one more question for you. According to the SDG 3 goal, which is the thematic unit of our ASEFYL2 project, what are the most important, okay, it's cut with Thailand, I guess, sorry. What are the most important, about what we are most proud about Thailand efforts, and what are the countries have to be learned from you? I'm going to change the question because also has to do with Thailand. Sorry for that.
Well, I think that Thailand has, has managed to keep the numbers down. That is, I think, the main, one of the big achievements that it can show. And I think this has mainly been done, of course, through these measures that I was just referring to before, the social distancing, washing the hands, and so on and so on. I think that is something that other countries can learn from. And then, well, then the other question is, but again, please, I always have to do this bracket because I'm speaking on my own behalf here. So I think it is responsibility of all of us to look at this. And maybe it's also a matter of that we have to learn, to a certain extent at least, to live with the virus, because the virus cannot be totally ignored, and maybe it is not possible to have a zero cases in the first place. One major thing in that regard is that we have to watch that our health systems can cope with it. So as long as we manage to have people, if they fall sick and if they show more complicated symptoms, that we are able to treat them well, so that they can then have access to whatever medicines we have, and so that and there is, I think, again, the right balance to be found to see how far we can allow the virus to spread without putting at danger the overall public health of the whole population. So it is always a question of balance. And in that regard, I think that Thailand has somehow managed, you know, also to have some successes. If figures become too high, then you do more lockdowns, you restrict movements, you ask people more to stay at home, and so on. And otherwise, if that is not the case, then you may be able to open up a little bit more. I think so. It's in my personal view, at least, it's not a matter of black and white. It's something in between where we can see what can we bear and how can we cope with that. Thank you.
His Excellency, thank you very much. It's very interesting what you have mentioned to us. Now I think it's time to pass the floor to Patiba. Thank you from my side for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charalampos, and good evening, Mr. Faber. I've particularly been struck by your comments so far around how COVID-19 is a common problem that knows no boundaries, and that sense of collective global responsibility that we owe each other. You also spoke earlier a little bit about reopening borders and the tensions between public health versus economic development. Again, that'll require a collective responsibility and a collective effort. And many have said that multilateralism is perhaps one of the best ways that we can tackle global challenges. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts on how global governance is likely to be further reformed in the context of COVID-19, which may have seen perhaps weakening multilateralism in some areas of the world, but perhaps stronger multilateralism in other areas of the world.
Thank you very much for these questions. I think well, up front, I would like to say that there is, of course, tendencies that are existing, and these independent from the COVID. But I think that at the same time, COVID has exacerbated some of these tendencies. If on one side, for instance, if we look at work from home, which is, of course, a lot of us, we have to work from home in these conditions. But I'm sure that that will also be continued afterwards, maybe not to the same extent. The same goes about traveling, international travel, air travel especially, because we also realize, and maybe that is the good thing about the COVID, that we realize that some of the things that we did before were actually not healthy ways, healthy in the sense of towards the environment or to all of that. So, and that is one thing. Now, and the same thing goes in my view, about multilateralism. I think multilateralism is for me something that is totally unavoidable, and it is something that we need to work on. Of course, it's always easier to think that one can cope best by oneself, and that one is looking egoistically at things, and that one doesn't have to rely on somebody else to achieve some results. But personally, I am convinced that the bigger the countries and the more powerful the country, the later they will realize that they are actually dependent on the others. And it's, of course, now we've gone, not to mention the US or China, of course, these are tendencies that are there. But I think that international cooperation is an absolute necessity. Unfortunately, often we don't walk the talk. We talk about cooperation, and we talk about this. I remember in the beginning when the COVID came out, and we were talking about vaccines, and vaccines should be immediately distributed as far as possible and as quickly as possible, and that there should not be vaccine nationalism and so on. And partially we have managed that, but if you look at what happened even in Europe, even though Europe also exports a lot of vaccines, there was a big row between the UK and Europe. Of course, you can say that had to do with Brexit as well, whatever, but it also shows, or now we have, for instance, the initiative that the American President Biden has proposed to ignore intellectual property rights for the time being. And then the Europeans saying, well, no, that's not the solution because, So all of these things will always pop up and will always come. But at the same time, we need to look at that and, and seek what is, again, the best for all of us. But again, I am deeply convinced that multilateralism is maybe under attack for the time being, partially, but I think it's also, it is something that we will not be avoiding, and hopefully, at least from my perspective, not at all, because I think it is the only way that humanity and the planet can survive. So I think in that regard, a lot lies in your responsibility as a young generation, and hopefully, if I may speak as an older generation, hopefully we leave you enough time and space to realize that. Thanks.
No, thank you very much for your remarks. I think I definitely agree with this idea that multilateralism is unavoidable given the globalized world that we now live in. I'm keen to explore more your phrase that we don't walk the talk, and I'm keen to know more about why that is. And so I really want to ask, what do you see as some of the barriers to greater collaboration? Why is it that we don't collaborate on issues of global health, well-being, but also other intersecting issues of sustainability and development?
Well, the easy answer is always nationalism and populism and egoism. That is the easiest answer to that. But how to tackle it is more the question. I think there's so much at stake also economically, and that if you take and I don't want to, I have to be careful now. If you're looking, no, I mean, there's much at stake also in terms of if you look at the pharma industry. Of course, it is very, if you, as a pharma industry, if you invest into new medicines, that costs a lot of money. And maybe only 1 out of 10 of your products or medicines will actually be making money. All the rest will be just lost, So that is one thing. That's why, of course, intellectual property rights are extremely important. On the other side, we need indeed to find, again, it's the way of finding the right balance. If, for instance, if you to come back a little bit to the row between Europe and the US on this, where the Europeans say, well, if you can give intellectual property rights free, but if you do not export the what do you call that again, the pre-products or the basic products that you need to fabricate those, then it is of no use. So again, it's something about international cooperation. On one side, you have to also to allow these exports so that in another place these things can indeed be produced. So it is, I think the most important part is that we have to realize that a win-win can only be indeed if everybody wins and not only one party. And so maybe it has to do, of course, with economic priorities, and of course, also if you want to put it on a larger scale, even power politics and geopolitics. But I wouldn't go into that here now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your remarks. I really appreciated your vision for the future, and that we really need to shift our attention to more solution-based collaborative approaches. I also want to thank my fellow moderators, Pam and Charalampos, and I will now pass on to Leonie, I think.
Thank you.
Shall we let Agnes and Nicolas practice a bit? By the way, I changed my background. I think when we wanted to include the colors, the flags above the ASEF logo. So I'm going to send you that for your countries. I think it's, Freya, what do you think aesthetically? It's okay, no? Probably, yeah. I think it's best to keep it all on one side. Huh? Yeah, we'll send you that.
Leonie.
Yeah.
Can I say something? Because the Cypriot flag has a white background, we can put like a black label.
I did. Yeah, I was just doing it and I realized that it's white, exactly. So yeah, I did a slight gray frame. I'll send it to you in 1 second.
All right, thank you.
Leo, I have a question. When they thank the DPM, what is the protocol? How do they? Probably it's just best to say thank you, Your Excellency.
Yeah, for Deputy Prime Minister, you're never wrong if you say Excellency. That is, I think, especially in Asia, that is something that is largely used. So if you address him by Your Excellency, that should be okay.
And probably easier also than doing some kind of word twist like Mr. Deputy Prime Minister.
Just say Your Excellency. I think that should be okay. That is respectful and yeah.
Okay. Sarul Chana, can you, and maybe for the others also best, I have difficulties pronouncing the family name of your DPM, so that's the reason also why I probably will use Your Excellency. But maybe you can send through the WhatsApp group one time his full name, Don. It's definitely not Pramudwine, how I would pronounce it. It's something else. But so that the others can also hear it. And I would like to ask you as well for your own names, just send me on WhatsApp or send all of us in the WhatsApp group your name one time, and then we pronounce it rightly and you can practice. Okay, Agnieszka, Nicolas, would you like to jump in? And in the meantime, I'll send you the updated backgrounds, yeah? You check it out.
Yes, for sure. For me, you can put either Belgian or European flag. It's the same.
No, you are for Belgium, the participant, no EU flag. And not college, no College of Europe flag.
No, that's for sure. That's for sure.
If you want to get an internship at the Commission, you can maybe have maybe Leo can help you with this. But for now, you take the Belgian flag.
So you can have both. You can have the Belgium and EU flag.
No.
Yes.
No, only take Belgium. Only have the countries and no space.
The EU is part of Belgium. I mean,
Yes.
the other way around. Belgium is part of the EU. But anyway, okay, I'm not getting into that. Okay.
Okay, so good morning, Your Excellency. I'm very honored to be here, and I really wanted to ask you a question that is close to my heart. The question is, do you see it feasible for Asian countries to create a solid and shared healthcare system, like in the European Union, let's say, that we are sharing also these visions together, or the principle of non-interference, which characterizes Asian approach, will make it hard to deliver a common approach in this area. What do you think about it?
Thank you. Okay, I understand there's two questions. One is on social security and the other one is on the non-interference.
Yeah, yes, but
correct?
it's connected.
Okay. Yeah, well, okay. Well, social, again, this is for me easier to respond as a European than as an Asian. But I think that first, for me at least, yeah, social security is something that is extremely useful. It is, in my eye, one of the fundamental rights that we should have. I think it is. It's even in the UN texts. So in that regard, but it is a very important aspect, and I think it is an extremely important utility or to fight poverty. Because if you have, and you see that very clearly during these times, when you have people coming out of poverty and gaining some wealth or some well-being, or let's say economic well-being, if a crisis like this hits and people lose their jobs, they immediately fall back into poverty. So in that regard, you see that countries that have a good social security systems, like for instance also here Singapore, it is much easier to maintain people at least in their, maybe not in their jobs, but at least assure a certain well-being. Now, I don't really see your point on how these two are linked, because non-interference is, of course, that is a very large a very large discussion, and in my view, the non-interference, it depends. If even in Europe, countries will tell you, don't interfere in my internal affairs. That's none of your business. Of course, in Europe, as we have a supranational arrangement, some of these things do not play anymore in the same regard. But interference is, or non-interference is also very closely linked to the issue of sovereignty and all of that. So why, first of all, I think that we should look at, especially in Southeast Asia or in Asia in general terms, why is this so important for these people? And I think that when, for instance, ASEAN was created, many of these countries, at the beginning, I think Thailand was the only country that had not been colonized. So it is very natural for countries to insist on their sovereignty and because they made very bad experiences in the past when others came from overseas and interfered in their internal affairs. So also, if you look at, I think one of the big conferences was the Asia-Africa conference in 1955 in Bandung, with the 5 principles of non-interference, meaning that you leave everyone develop their own country in according to their own will, you know. So that regard, of course, is important. Now, the interference, non-interference, especially today, if you ask that question to the Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, I'm not sure how he will react. I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't ask the question, but you know, obviously this comes immediately to the question of Myanmar. And as you may know, this is a very delicate topic, and especially also for ASEAN. I think on the, let's say, on the think tank approach or in the think tank environment, things can be discussed. But I think between ASEAN governments, this is, of course, you have differences between some of the ASEAN countries. For instance, the country I served in before, Laos, is absolutely on the side of non-interference because they obviously would be very much reluctant to see somebody from the outside and tell them what they would have to do. I don't want to develop this further, but because this is extremely, you know, among us here, I say that, I think for instance, I don't know if how far you're aware of the R2P, the responsibility to protect, is the idea that when does the point come where the outside world has to interfere in a country to make sure that there will be no further breaches of human rights or violations of human rights, or even genocide or whatever. And that is, of course, that is a discussion that has been or is being led at the UN. But there is no final conclusion on that. So, and as you know, especially the ASEAN would be very reluctant to engage much further, especially not with Europeans on that topic. But again, it is. I mean, if you want to address the question on non-interference with the Deputy Prime Minister of, I mean, you can ask. He's the Foreign Minister, so he should have just be careful how you ask the question. And would be my recommendation, because I'm not.
Thank you.
You don't want to.
Anyway, you're not supposed to ask that question if it's not selected by Thailand. Yeah, this is so really stick to the question they are giving. They are coming back to us. They have been very firm on this.
So we are currently waiting for them to come back to us on which questions they have
especially
selected.
Especially as you know that Thailand is in a particular situation, also versus Myanmar. So please,
maybe I wasn't so clear.
Yeah,
but if the question was actually linked.
Explain to me the link that you see between social security and non-interference. That I honestly
actually, because the first question was to create a solid and shared healthcare system, and so the question is, if we share the health system with other Asian countries, then in this case there is this question of non-interference. Actually, I didn't want to interrupt you, to be honest. Yes, but it was more in this sense, actually.
Yeah, okay, but if it's not interference as long as, I mean, if you, for instance, in development cooperation, you basically wait for a request from a country. The same goes for humanitarian aid. If a country wants to have humanitarian aid because of, let's say, a natural disaster, then and you bring that aid into the country, then it's not interference because you have been asked to do it. The same goes in that regard. If you want to have a vaccination or a campaign being financed by the outside world and you request it, then it's not interference. Interference, you know, there's a difference in that regard. I'm not sure if that responds to your question, though.
Yes. Yeah, I think we can accept it. Thank you very much. I understand your point. Now I will give the floor to Agnese because she will be happy to ask a question to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and thank you very much, Your Excellency. In relation to everything that we said, I wanted to ask you, as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, how do you see the barriers for global health and well-being, sustainability and development?
Sorry, I didn't hear clearly.
Sure,
no problem. Between development and public health, or?
the barriers in the global health and well-being, sustainability and development?
Okay. Well, thank you also for this question. So, of course, health is one of the main SDGs, and if you don't have health, you will not be able to have a sustainable development. I think we all agree on that. So, and as I said already before, if you have a pandemic like the ongoing one, this obviously has a very far-reaching impact on global health, and in that regard, of course, also on well-being. The question is, again, for me, is more a matter of developing good health systems. Because if you have a good health system, you can also, as I said, on one side, you can cope with a pandemic up to a certain degree. If you do not have a health system, then of course it's immediately a catastrophe. I mean, if I may quote on the Laos experience, Laos had very good policy of containment of the virus, because they just closed the borders, they didn't let nobody in, and it was fine. Basically, there were no cases. So because they knew that they have a non-performing health system. Unfortunately, now over PMI, so the Lao New Year, there were some people who had illegally crossed the border, the river, and then brought in the virus, and now you have an exponentially growth of infections. So again, that's why it shows that, and of course they are now scared that this will spread and that they will not be able to contain it, even though, well, they have done a lockdown now. But anyway, so that is, again, it's always a little bit also the question of the means that you have at your disposal to address an issue. If you have the means to do that, then of course it's easier. But if you don't, then something can quickly evolve into a worsening problem, and that will of course then hamper further development. In that regard, again, if you have an unhealthy population, or a population that is not, for instance, not well nourished or during childhood, that will have an impact on the whole life of these people, because they will learn less well, they will, they will not have access to the same kind of education later on. So everything is really related in that regard. So thank you. I'll stop here if you want.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It was a great privilege and an honor to listen to you and having you answering our questions. Thank you.
Okie doke. Leo, we close with our admin notes. Any other tips, tricks, things DPMs like to hear? When somebody answers with "thank you very much," was a very interesting answer. Is that actually really interesting?
Well, if it is meant like that, it's always a problem. You never know that. No, but I think you're doing well. I must say today the sound here is not very clear, so I had a little bit of trouble understanding. But that is, of course, not your fault over there. Otherwise, yeah, just prepare your questions well in the sense that they are easily understood what you expect, as an answer. So if you, for instance, the question on sovereignty or on interference, if it is misunderstood, a thing like that can quickly bring you into a little bit of a bad atmosphere, or he may misunderstand that. So please try to avoid that. But otherwise, I think you're all doing very well. No problem.
Thank you so much. Okay, der
Mo hat seine Schuldigkeit getan, der Mo darf gehen. Danke.
He was just saying that he has delivered his job today. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think what we do is at the end with all the moderators, we have a private session with you where you can ask all these questions and you give an honest answer with taking away your diplomatic hat, your ASEF DED hat, and we talk frankly. I think that's very important. Thanks so much, Leo. Okay, a few things which to remember. Maybe we pin someone else and put that person on screen. So I think, can you check your mailbox and try to, for those who can put the screenshot, sorry, the virtual background on, can you change it to your countries? I was just thinking if all of you wear black, you will look a little bit like a funeral congregation. So maybe amongst yourself in the WhatsApp group, you can decide who has black clothes, green clothes, red clothes, but definitely not skin color and not white. Yeah, I let you do that and then you figure this out. I wrote a few things in the email. Have a glass of water next to you. Don't drink from water bottles during that call. It looks very strange if you show your long neck like I do. That's why I always wear a scarf, by the way. Then it goes without saying, quiet background. Agnes, you have already very nicely arranged yourself. You realize the virtual background sometimes shows half of your room background as well, but now it looks good. Yeah, no pens, hair clips, nothing to fidget around. Pratibha, again, I think is there an aircon next to you or not? Or a fan? Okay, then it's just regular the hair like this. That's fine. That's a virtual background, huh? Like when they are longer hair. Yeah, I thought so. Okay, I think all of you watched probably the Swiss dialogue. Anything you noticed which is a good learning for you, or which we, for example, from our side should change? We know that there were a few technical glitches in advance that at the very beginning, but so we are figuring out that. But anything you would like to comment on? How did you find it?
Can I say something, Leonie?
Yes, please go ahead.
I think it would be preferable for me if we have the final catalog of the questions to divide the questions between the moderators in order to be more prepared to say something more, and not to choose the question during the session.
Yeah, no, that goes without saying. So once we have so that will happen to Switzerland as well. So we knew the 3 blocks of questions. And then we decided you take this, you take care of this block, you take care of that block, because then you can also think a little bit already about the transitions. And what is nice, I mean, you're a medical student, for example, if there's a question about vaccines, you can also make it more personalized and you can say, as a medical student, I have a particular interest in this and this and that, or Sarul Chana works in development cooperation, so she can also connect certain things better. So I would, suggest to you to think about how you would like to thank him afterwards, but do this briefly. Let's not spend too much time, because I already realized also I prepared some MC notes for Voradon and me, that half of the time we're just thanking and thanking and thanking. So I think we spent already 5 minutes of this whole 1 hour just thanking. Thanking him, thanking them, thanking. So let's keep this a little bit limited. Voradon, I sent you the MC draft and included you there. Take a look. You and me, we need to practice separately because we have more of a ping pong exchange at the very beginning. So then what else did I want to say? Very important are really the transitions. Freya, can I ask you to show that SDG3 graph? Just share it on screen, how it looks. Because probably when we do that, we have to take one moderator out. Oh no, we don't have to, okay. So our idea is to make this a little bit more vibrant, to show, for example, that word cloud which we created. So that is a question maybe, Chalampos, which you can start with, or Sarul Chana can start with, and make a few comments, and then we can ask the DPM. But we will check this with Thailand, huh? Sorry.
I will update you when we have a fixed decision on this.
Yeah. So you can, for example, say, this is what the young people have selected. With which of these concepts do you feel, I mean, personally or as a government leader most connected to, what are you focusing on? So we try to find a few of these to make, to change a little bit that, the flow. So yeah, so the easiest for us is definitely to keep you in 15-minute blocks. So you can close your chapter and then have maybe for each of you one of these graphics where you can talk a little bit about. We thought about including Agnes and Nicolas as well somehow, but we think it's better to avoid technical glitches that you're just there as a backup. So in case one of the others falls sick, then it's your turn. Otherwise, we keep you for one of the next dialogues, and then we'll see how the gender balance fits, etc. So we think this is smarter than changing too much right now and confuse the DPM and the MFA in Thailand. The key.
Can I ask something, Leonie?
Yeah.
Because I have a couple of questions, but one on this. I totally agree with you that on like it's the function of the backups. My question is, what happens if the problem arises during the dialogue? So obviously there is an issue and a scenario where one of the three people, the three moderators are going to have a problem before. But what happens if there is like an internet connection issue or a computer issue? Obviously, I hope that is not going to happen and today everything runs smoothly, but do we have a scenario, kind of like an action plan in case something like this happen?
Yeah, so knock on wood, it didn't, it didn't work last time, knock on wood, it didn't work, it will not work it will not happen next time. So the best would be if something happens that we know during the dry run that something is going wrong. Yeah, then it's clear. So you have to all of you, I think, have to familiarize yourselves in general with the questions. You have your own question catalog, but you have your, like in general, an idea what the others are asking as well. So please print these out as well. Otherwise, so there are different options to it. Number one is you can look at, we have to look at the time and see how much time has passed. Because if it happens to the last one, you can just stretch and stretch and stretch a little bit. We have a WhatsApp group. Definitely, if something happens during the dialogue, don't try like for 2-3 minutes to speak. One of you then has to jump in, one of the other two, and say, oh, it seems that our co-moderator, Agnes, currently faces a technical issue. Let me take over her question, or let me continue with the questions. And then we are fixing within the WhatsApp group, but not the existing moderators. We just then check with the two of you and the one who has a problem, yeah? So you do not need to, so, okay, how to say that?
So Agnes and Nicolas, don't jump in unless we give you the go-ahead to jump in, basically. So between Haralambos, Pratibha, and Pam, the three of you, if someone's internet goes down or something's wrong with the microphone or something, one of you then has to jump in and say, I think my co-moderator is facing some technical difficulties. I will ask the next question on their behalf. And then we see what happens from there in that moment. And then we will let Nicolas and Agnes know if we want to bring you in at that point.
Yeah. So we don't know to which detail Thailand is preparing the answers. We got from our call last week the impression that they have, for each of you, they will probably prepare 3 to 4 questions for each of you. So in total, probably 12 questions. That's what our impression was. Maybe, you see have a clock next to you and see how after 3 questions, how much time you still have. If it's only 2 minutes left, hand over to the next person. And then the next person maybe can ask the full-fledged 4-question catalog. Yeah, but as Freya said, yes, we liaise only with the person who was kicked out and the backup moderators. The other two, please do not check your phones. If things are running smoothly for you, just keep on going. Yeah, keep on going. And then if we need to bring Agnes or Nicolas in, then maybe what we can do